Professor William C. Banks is recognized internationally as an expert in constitutional law, national security law, and counterterrorism. Since 1987, when the Federation of American Scientists asked him to provide a legal perspective on first use of nuclear weapons, Professor Banks has helped set the parameters for the relatively new field of national security law. He's a graduate of the University of Nebraska and the University of Denver, where he earned his JD degree and a master's in law and society. Mr. Banks joined the faculty of the Syracuse University College of Law in 1978. He became the founding director of the Institute for National Security and Counterterrorism at Syracuse in 2003. He also served as special counsel to the United States Senate Judiciary Committee in 1994. Mr. Banks worked on the committee on the confirmation hearings for Supreme Court nominee Stephen G. Breyer.
I appreciate the invitation to speak to the subcommittee today, and I'll focus on the constitutionality of H.R. 980. Ordinarily, the Constitution reserves to the states the authority to manage labor relations within their borders. Indeed, the virtue of our federal system is on display in the rich variety of approaches to managing labor relations in the 50 states. For public sector workers, however, the federal system has denied their full protection, and in some 21 states, their rights to collectively bargain are not fully recognized. Although a principal value of our federal system is to encourage states to find new and creative solutions to policy problems in their state legislative laboratories, all of us know that at times that discretion for states to shape their own approaches to policy problems has stood in the way of the protection of important individual rights. In such situations, the federalism value of state creativity can and should be subordinated to the more compelling federalism value of protecting individual liberties. In my opinion, Congress has the constitutional authority to enact H.R. 980 under the Commerce Clause, and its enactment would not violate the 10th Amendment. It has been clear since 1937 that Congress may regulate labor management relations in employment in or affecting interstate commerce. When Congress extends its commerce-based regulations to public employees and employers, the 10th Amendment has presented an obstacle only when Congress attempts to, quote, commandeer, end quote, state or local regulatory processes by requiring states and or cities to adopt and implement a federal regulatory program. The Supreme Court's 1985 decision in Garcia allowed Congress to extend wage and hour protections to state and local workers over the 10th Amendment objections of the city for two reasons that have significance in your consideration of H.R. 980. First, the Court noted that federalism values are especially well protected by the structural guarantees of our government. State and local interests are well represented in our Congress, particularly in the House of Representatives. In other words, if Congress determined that wage and hour protections should be extended to public sector workers in the states and cities, the representatives from those districts followed their constituents' policy preferences, that public sector workers should enjoy the minimum wage, maximum hour protections afforded those in the private sector. Second, the Court recognized that one of the most important purposes of our federal system, ensuring individual liberty, would be advanced by permitting Congress to extend the wage and hour protections. The Court's decisions since Garcia do not call into question Congress's authority to apply generally applicable federal protections, such as wage and hour or collective bargaining rights to state and local governments. The commandeering problem that caused the Court to strike down radioactive waste legislation and the Brady Act extending handgun controls does not taint, in my view, H.R. 980. This bill does not require state or local governments to enact or implement a federal regulatory program. Instead, H.R. 980 places the onus on federal implementation through the FLRA. If a state chooses not to enact a program that meets federal requirements, the FLRA steps in. In the radioactive waste and Brady Act settings, the legislation did not afford states any such choice. Instead, they were obligated to regulate through state and local mechanisms to achieve the federal policy goals. I will note briefly one other constitutional objection that has been raised to H.R. 980, the state's sovereign immunity protected by the 11th Amendment. Recent decisions of the Supreme Court protect states from suits brought in federal court by citizens of their state or of other states. H.R. 980 creates no right of action for individuals directly, and thus the bill does not confront those limitations. In addition, under H.R. 980, in states where the FLA regulates to ensure collective bargaining, any eventual enforcement of state recalcitrance would be initiated by the agency, not by any individual. Federal agencies are not affected in their litigation against states or cities by the 11th Amendment. I'll conclude my remarks now and would eagerly await any questions you might have. Thank you.